evening. And now the recording is in progress. So careful what you say, or someone will track you down and realize that you want to be a leader, and we will assign you additional tasks and committee work, of course. So this is kind of a free form. Feel free to put questions in the chat box. If you want an anonymous question, just send it to me, and I will repeat it and make up a name. But while we're waiting for people to ask questions, basically what tonight's event is to ask leaders in the School of Medicine how they got where they are, what it is that they're doing, and what's their advice for faculty that want to get more involved in leadership opportunities. So let's just open up the floor, and I guess I'll ask Megan Osborn first. How did you end up where you are, and why did you decide to become a leader in school medicine?
Thank you, Brian. I think I ended up here by volunteering for a lot of things, just for volunteering for a lot of things. I started as the chair for the Promotions and Honors Committee, which is a student committee that oversees discipline issues as well as promotions. I was the chair of the Admissions and Financial Aid Committee, and then a member of the Admissions Committee. And so those experiences, I think, made me a well-rounded fit for the Dean of Students role, and as well as my experience as a residency director. So I would just say that it's important to join committees. I think those are the best way to network with a lot of the staff, as well as make some friends and mentors with the jobs that you want to have eventually. I think that that's like Dr. Lee Buckland and Dr. Weekman and a lot of leaders in the School of Medicine really helped, and Dr. Fox really helped me find leadership opportunities because I was there. So that's my short answer for that.
You were in the room where it happened, or
Yes,
place yourself in the room where it happened.
exactly.
All right, Coleen Cunningham. Aside from driving a minivan, I'm not sure what vehicle that is. How did you end up?
It's a Prius,
It's a
but
Prius.
I'm not driving. I'm parked. But so I got into leadership in part when I first started. I was sort of like, oh no, I'm not going to do leadership. I'm going to be the worker bee. And I found out that, like, if you don't take an active role, then you can't complain about how things turn out. And so if you want to help move things forward, then you kind of have to step up and volunteer, as Megan said. But I would caution people, volunteering for committees is good if those committees are things that you want to do, but you have to be strategic about what you volunteer for. You have some people that just put their hand up for everything because they're afraid they're going to miss out on something, and they get so overwhelmed with committees that they're actually not focused on what they're supposed to do. So for a lot of my junior people, I used to say, for the first 3 years, I don't want you on a single committee unless it's something that's very strategic and very critical for your career, because I want you to focus on your research. I want you to focus on whatever it is that is your career path. And if there's something that's really important, then come to me and we'll talk about, does that committee fit into your career path? Because I do see junior people, get volunteered for a ton of committees and then lose their focus on where they want to go. But I think the networking part of it is really important. So, once you've found your committee or your place, it is important to network with people, and it is important to raise your hand and volunteer to get things done. Because as soon as you have a reputation for being somebody that gets things done, you will have more leadership opportunities and you'll know what to do with.
Right. So volunteer, but be focused on what you're volunteering for. All right, Dr. Abbott.
Okay, so similar to Megan, I came here as a full professor. When I arrived at UCI, I was a full professor. So I said yes to every committee that they asked me to do. So I ended up being on SRAC, ARAC, and the library committee Then I ended up being chair of ARAC and SRAC. Then I became chair of the College of Health Sciences Senate Executive Committee, and then we reformed the School of Medicine Executive Committee, and I became chair of that for a year as well. So I think so, but you definitely wouldn't want to do all that if you're assistant professor or even necessarily associate. But it was phenomenal experience because I got to meet so many people, network, as was mentioned, look how things operate here. And I had no intention of doing any paid leadership positions or decanal positions, to be honest. But I was approached after all that activity to do it. So I didn't really have any aspirations, much like Coleen, actually. I didn't, right, but it just sort of happened, and I went with it. But managing the committees is really important when you're a bit more junior, especially. But when you're a full professor, if you're interested, I think there's no substitute for doing that kind of work. The amount of people you meet and you get to see how everything runs was really important, I think.
And I like the comment that, and if you want to make a difference, you're serving on a committee and making a difference in that one small way. Hopefully that can snowball. All right, Namisha Parekh.
So I started my job here at UCI straight out of my training. And I think similar to Megan, I was actually just kind of put on stuff in my division, and then opportunities came across where I became the program director of the GI Fellowship. And I did that for 9 years. I actually did not sit on any committees. I took that advice really well and did no committees for many, many years. And I feel like, now I feel like maybe I should have done a few, because then I would have been able to network more. So I did follow that advice, maybe too strictly. I only did fellowship and I only did my practice, but that's what I focused on building. So then, and I landed in this role that I'm in right now with the associate dean job, is sort of, I actually just thought, I haven't really applied for a job, and I wonder what it's like to interview for this type of leadership role. I'm not qualified, but I should just take a look in it. So I took a chance, and here I am almost 4 years later in the role. So I'm a believer in trying to take chances. You just never know. And it's always good practice to try to look for jobs, even if you don't feel you're qualified. You never know what will happen, and it will prepare you for the next one that's coming up.
Right. Well, in my case, I'm a basic scientist in a clinical department. And so obviously in a leadership role, I'm never going to be department chair, or highly likely I wouldn't be a department chair. So I served on escrow, the stem cell use committee, and IACUC, the animal use committee. And after that, I ended up being vice chair for research in physical medicine and rehab. And while I was doing that, someone, I don't know who to blame, but someone nominated me for the Provost Leadership Academy. I went and did that, and we worked on how to hire faculty and how to use diversity and equity statements in faculty hiring. And that got me really interested in the process of what goes on behind the scenes. How do we change policy, or how do we implement policy? And then a job opening in the dean's office came up, and I applied, and Jeff made the mistake of hiring me. Blame Jeff. But it's turned out pretty well. It's a lot more work than one might expect. I was warned about that. But if you like the work, it's not terrible. You just end up working the 5:15 to 6:15 shift on every month, first Monday of the month, or whatever it might be. But it all works out. It all works out just fine. And I think being involved, it's harder to complain about the system when you're actually involved and you're in the system.
All right. So I have a question for the panel. Is what do you think are critical skills or experiences that mid-career faculty should focus on, as they now are several years into their job, they're comfortable with their research, their clinical experience, to help them transition into other leadership roles?
So I think the most important thing is your people skills. And I think emotional intelligence is really critical. And then your ability to understand other people. We all look at the world a certain way, and other people look at the world a different way than the way we look at the world. And the more you can start to understand that, the easier time you have in being effective in convincing other people to move in the direction you think they should move in, or hearing them and learning for yourself that actually maybe they're right, and you should move in that direction. But I think we when we go to med school or when we do our PhD training or ever, we get very little training in emotional intelligence and in basic leadership and understanding people. And I think those are critically important skills to have. And I would encourage everybody. It helps you in life too, not just work, but really to really dive into emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I can second that. You know, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in a wide variety of jobs. I was a truck driver, worked in meat processing plants, worked in a farm, et cetera, et cetera. And so meeting people across the entire spectrum, it's really important because all that, and I know we can't all turn back the clock and go through those experiences, but I think you can treat every day as a learning experience. Meeting that wide variety of people and learning how to work with them is really, really important. And I think now I work with a ton of staff, for instance, as well as the faculty and leadership. And you learn the best approach is to treat everybody, on the same level. I think obviously there are some people who report to you and some people who you report to, but you really, if you can persuade people that they want to work for you and they're invigorated by working for you and they're excited every morning when they wake up to do their job, that's it, right? So how do you achieve that? Well, that's a longer description, but I think if you take that philosophy into leadership roles, it's really helpful.
Megan, do you have any advice as it
I
relates
do.
to also like med ed? Because a lot of people are interested in med ed opportunities.
Yeah, I was actually going to take a different tack, and I will expand on med ed as well, from Coleen and Jeff, but it was very good advice by both of them. But one thing I would say is that mid-career is that time when you're going to be transitioning from an assistant to an associate or from associate to full professor. And so I think it's important to think about your candidacy for those promotions. And so I think while considering your leadership roles within UCI, I think you also need to consider your leadership roles from a national standpoint and international standpoint as well. And so I would say that it's important to start, if you enjoy speaking, speak at your national, whatever your national leadership organization is for your specialty. And a lot of times those are hard to break into. So they have young speakers panels that sometimes help for that if you are interested in becoming a speaker. And young speakers panels just means that you haven't spoken at a national conference before. So a lot of those have that. You could obviously do abstracts and research as well. And then a lot of the international conferences actually are a lot easier to break into than the national conferences, surprisingly. And basically just need to say that you're interested in going and that you can pay your own way, and you can through your travel funds at UCI if you have those through your department, or I set aside money from my paycheck in a CME account in April of every year. You can put up to, I think it's $10,000 or $15,000 into that account every year to pay for that. And so you can just reach out to some of these international conferences and say, hey, I'd be happy to give a lecture on this. And so that will really help with your national and international reputation as you try to advance especially in the HS series. If you're in the Clinic series, you need to back that up with research as well. But if you're in the HS series, that certainly speaking nationally and internationally would be sufficient in addition to your teaching commitment. In terms of med ed, what I would focus on, there's several opportunities that occur that you kind of need to be at the right place, the right time for, but at the same time, what is it, like luck is when opportunity meets preparedness, right? That cliche thing. And so getting to know the players. So for example, in med ed, there are a lot of leadership roles. And like, I think it was Brian was saying, or Jeff was saying, or Coleen, maybe it was one of the panelists before me who said, like, if you do a good job, then people are going to recognize that and like have you do stuff. So for example, I work with several different people. I work with admissions committee. I work with career advisors. I can talk about what that is for a second. You know, Dr. Ray works with dean scholars, and certainly the shining lights that are like above and beyond, and the students know they can rely on. And I don't hear any complaints. Like I can't get a hold of my career advisor. Like that person, if there comes an assistant dean for students job, like certainly they're going to be highly considered because they've proven that they can manage their time well and that they are responsive to people. So those opportunities include the admissions committee. We have elected admissions committee members. The application goes out annually, usually around this time, around July. The email would be from Crystal Mesa. Career advisors, that is more of you kind of just let me know that you're interested in, and I reach out to, I have people recommend people for that position. Again, it's not a lot of protected time, but it certainly is a step into a larger leadership role if you're able to perform well in that role. And then dean scholars as well. I mean, like being a dean scholar is a protected role at, I believe it's 40%. So that's, or 40%, is that, yeah, 40%. So that's pretty good. Career advisor is a protected role at, I believe, 5%. And then admissions committee is around the same.
Yes, I was going to partially add a kind of shameless advertisement, but these seminars are recorded and they're posted on the academic personnel website. So in the past, you know, we've had sessions on, we're having a session in October 14th, starting a lab and mentoring students. We've had ones on running effective meetings or networking and social media in science and medicine, using technology for effective learning. So if these things interest you, they're recorded. You can go back to the website and look at them. And it's kind of to Colleen's point about, you know, we're not trained in this stuff. You know, we get right out of residency or postdocing and we're right onto the job. And so you have to seek out that training yourself. You can email any of us. I'm sure we could hook you up with some of these things. But a good place to start is the Academic Affairs website, where we've recorded a lot of these sessions in the past. So I would ask, and Megan, you were kind of getting to this, but I want to ask everyone on the panel is, what are the strategies you'd recommend for overcoming barriers to leadership at the mid-career level, such as limited time or limited resources? So you were beginning to mention that, but maybe Jeff or Coleen, you could add to that. How do we deal with limited time and resources?
Well, you know, I think you have to, I remember coming up through assistant professor and associate. I didn't really have much of a plan about what my career was going to look like, and just sort of stumbled into a leadership role eventually. But I think that's not a good actually strategy. You have to ask yourself, what is my future going to look like? Do I view leadership as something that I want to do? And then if that's the case, you may have to make sacrifices in other components of your career. You may have to say, well, you know, I'm going to cut down on another element to focus on cultivating my leadership kind of qualifications. So there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, and we're all really busy people. So I think you have to be strategic about it and think about what aspects you're going to emphasize in the future. Or you may have to say, I'm going to sacrifice some family time for a few years to really make a go of this and shuffle around like that. But you have to be really careful about burnout, right? So it's difficult. It's difficult, but I think we have to. None of us can do everything 100%. So we have to decide what we're going to focus on and strategize. And then, you know, there's mentorship is a really important component of this, but we can talk about that as well later, because you can get really good advice and you can get not so good advice, right? So I think it's really important to talk to leaders and have a mentor that understands your particular situation, because every single one of us on this call is different, right? Yeah.
Colleen?
So I definitely agree with Jeff. I would just add that critically look at what you're spending your time doing, because there are some people that are very generous with their time, and they're doing a number of things that that are not necessarily building their career. Whereas there's some other people that are so focused, they only do stuff to build their career and they don't volunteer to do anything extra. You want to be somewhere in the middle. You want to be a good citizen, and you want to volunteer to help out when appropriate. But you do, when it comes to the limited number of hours in the day, you need to take a step back and be willing to say, okay, what am I spending my time doing, and which of those things are useful and productive, and which of those things are things that I could be delegating to somebody else. I could be giving somebody else a leadership opportunity to take on, these are two of my tasks that aren't contributing to my career development, and it's giving them a chance to take on a leadership opportunity at the same time, freeing me up so that I can, do the extra work I need to do to pursue the leadership experience that I want to pursue. I also think the other thing is to talk to your boss, whether it's your department chair or your dean, because they want you to be successful. And so if you say, my goal is in 5 years to be doing X, Y, and Z, or to, be starting a new institute at UCI, whatever it is your goal is, don't hesitate to say, this is my vision, and this is how I think I'm going to get there, and get their input and potentially their support to help you move in that direction you need to go in.
So I know Jeff and Colleen, all of you guys actually touched on this a little bit, but to ask kind of more formalized, we know mentorship plays a lot of importance with our students, our trainees. Mentorship is really important in our clinical and research areas of our positions, but what role does mentorship play in advancing to leadership positions, and how can mid-career faculty find influential mentors or become influential mentors for the purpose of leadership?
So I'll just quick, I think a big thing about mentorship and one of the barriers for future leaders is imposter syndrome. And I discuss this with a lot of people in leadership and other people. A lot of people have imposter syndrome that you wouldn't imagine might have imposter syndrome. And I think it's really important as leaders that we mentor future leaders and explain that we have it too, or we have had it in the past, because I think that stops a lot of people. So I think just having those frank discussions with people who are interested in leadership and going through their concerns, they might think, look, I can't do this, but I want to. I think it's really helpful because a lot of those, as we know, a lot of imposter syndrome is really just psychological. Those people can absolutely do that job, and I've had those conversations with people in the past, and they've become leaders in one way or another. So I think that's really important, because once it's so refreshing to sit down with someone who is a leader, and have them describe, yeah, I had imposter syndrome too, but I got over it. I think that's really important. And then going back to what Coleen was saying, if you could talk to someone who you respect, who maybe has been really successful in research, but also holds a big leadership position, just how do you do it? What's their version of making that work, right? What were the choices that they made? Because while we're not identical, we might be able to learn from that. And just hearing that it's possible and how they did it. But it's really, Colleen's point is so true. You have to pick and choose, but don't be so single-minded. It's pretty transparent. We see those people, right? They're only ever doing something that benefits them, and they're not good citizens. And that's not, holistically, that's not good for the enterprise, and it's not good for that individual long term. So I think a good mentor can explain all this stuff and can contextualize it, especially if they're in the person's field or department, can contextualize the advice they give to be more specific for that person.
Megan, do you have any recommendations on how to find a mentor for leadership?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that I have anything profound to say, but I just think, I mean, reaching out to someone, especially at UCI, who is in a role that you would like to be in one day. I don't think, I'm not going to like reach out to Jeff and say, hey, I'm really interested in being the vice chair, or excuse me, the vice dean for research someday. Do you have advice for me? I don't think he's going to be like, no, thanks, not interested. Like everyone, I think, especially at UCI, is going to be very open to that. And so just cold calling someone in a leadership position, I think is very a reasonable approach. And I think having a mentor in that arena is good. But I think if you're reaching out, you also have to acknowledge that you're going to have a commitment as a mentee. And so like, so what do you want to get out of it? First of all, like, is it just a relationship, or is it that you want mentorship on a specific question? Or sorry, I should say, in addition, you don't want to be a flaky mentee. Like if I reach out and know that the next 3 months is going to be really, really busy, and I say to Dr. Prack, like, can we have lunch? And then we have lunch, and then she doesn't hear from me for like another year. Like she's not really going to consider me for a leadership role if one were to come along. But if I am proactive but not annoying, and say, hey, it was great meeting with you. Thank you. These are those answers to those questions that you had for me. Here's a follow-up question, and check in on a somewhat regular basis. Or like, here's what I've done. And I mean, not bragging, obviously, but just like, hey, this is what I've done as a result of our meeting. I think having that role as a mentee is really important too, and just acknowledging that you have that role as well.
Brian, do you have any? Oh, go ahead, Coleen.
Well, I was going to say, you absolutely, just as Megan said, just ask, because people are absolutely willing to mentor people in leadership, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a path that you aspire to, but that you admire that person's style of leadership or leadership skills. And early in my career, one of the people I would reach out to on a regular basis was a surgeon, and I was definitely not a surgeon. I was not going to pursue her path, but I really admired how she could stand up to people and articulate an argument in a way that didn't necessarily piss everybody off, but they could actually hear her. And I really just appreciated the way she could do that. And so, I would often go to her when I had questions or wanted support. So absolutely don't hesitate to ask people. And the other thing is, don't hesitate to ask people on a national level. So I had a lot of mentorship from people that worked at other institutions, but we were in the same area. So in that case, I was in the same area, those people, and could talk to them about strategies for, moving into leadership positions and strategy for building my skills. And that do not hesitate to reach out to those individuals as well.
Brian, did you have any other recommendations on how to find a mentor for leadership?
Well, I would say one thing I would say is talk to your current mentors and your current colleagues and let them know that you have aspirations. It's all about communication. And if people don't know that you have a desire to even put your toe in the water of leadership, you're not going to get recommended for committees, or you're not going to be recommended for the Provost Leadership Academy or the SAIL Academy or other leadership training opportunities that exist within the School of Medicine. So there are a lot of opportunities, but if nobody knows that you're curious, you're not going to get asked. And the other thing I would say is there's nothing wrong with, and I think Coleen just said it, but I would just expand on that, is take a colleague out to coffee or to lunch, and have some time, share a meal with somebody, and just chat. It doesn't have to be a plan. I need to talk with you because I want you to recommend me for something. Just to get to know them and what they do in their career path and what their advice is for you on other opportunities that are available. And in a different department, even in a different school, in the School of Medicine, or as was just suggested, in national organizations, international organizations. You can interview people for what their mentorship suggestions are, and they don't have to be at UCI's campus. They can just give you insight, and then you can go back to UCI's campus once you have more information. You might feel more comfortable talking to someone, outside your department or outside the campus as you try to formulate your plans.
Just to add, part of effective leadership is succession planning. So when you step down from your role, there is several people, any one of whom is qualified to take over, right? So in a way, mentees coming forward and saying, what does it take to do your job and what would your advice be? That helps the leader as well, because they won't be the person who anoints the person who takes over from them, but they will be able to say to the dean or whoever, oh, well, I have these 3 people that have constantly been in the loop about this. They're interested in leadership. I think they're capable, etc. So succession planning is really important. So mentees can actually help leaders by identifying themselves and working with the leadership.
That's a really good point. And now, we talked about mentorship, and Brian touched upon this about leadership development, like formalized training. Here at UCI, we have a couple programs. Nationally, there's a lot of different programs. A lot of different professional societies are offering leadership training. In your opinion or your experience, number one, have you ever done any of these types of training programs? Do you find it useful for mid-career faculty to do any of these types of leadership training programs? And how do they get into it too?
So I will admit that I have not, I had formal leadership training with my master's degree, but I haven't been involved in any mid-career leadership training. That's not to say that I don't need mid-career leadership training. And there are programs like ELAM and which is Leadership Academy for specifically focused on women. And we have a leadership academy here at UCI for women. And there are a lot of other leadership academies. I think that they are very useful for both identifying skills that you have, honing skills that you have, helping you prep for positions that you may want to attain. But I also can't speak from personal experience because I haven't done it. And that's mainly been that I've just had some personal experience, some personal stuff going on for the last year or so that has kind of prevented my time from being able to explore that a little bit more. And so I've had to kind of just focus on the job at hand. And honestly, at this point right today, I don't have a ton of aspirations for advancing further than I am at in the next 2 years. Certainly when my kids go to college, I would love to be a department chair or something like that, but I'm very happy in my current role. And I would love to have more leadership skills for my current role. And I attain those through national conferences and going to learn about how to be a better student affairs dean. But for right now, I'm happy at the current step on the ladder.
Also, to add to the question, just to make it more complicated for everybody, what about the use? Also, we talked about leadership training programs, but what about the use of a professional coach? If you guys could comment on that, if you have one, have worked with one, and would it be of use for mid-career faculty along with the leadership training program?
We actually have a coach through UCI. He was a former radiology professor, and he's for the students, and he is supposed to give us a certain amount of hours per year, and he doesn't. The students don't really access him as much as they could be. So if anyone does want to coach and want to try coaching, I can give you a recommendation, see if we could, you could use the medical student coach. I personally haven't used a coach, but there have been very many moments in my life where I've needed to make a decision and a coach would have been really useful. And instead I relied on alternate people for that. But certainly a coach could have filled that role.
So I think everybody is different, as I mentioned before, and everybody learns differently. So personally, I haven't taken any formalized leadership training, but I definitely had a lot of experience from chairing smaller committees, then chairing larger committees, and so on and so forth, chairing NIH study sections. And I think that's that kind of experience you build up to it gradually. So that works for me. We also had a 360 review done of everybody when I fairly early on in my senior associate dean role, and I found that incredibly useful. And the person who worked with me, Tammy Sickard, was incredible actually. So I got kind of a crash course in leadership and feedback very early on, and I think that was incredibly helpful. But generally, I've not taken those courses, but I've had lots of years of experience in sort of incrementally larger leadership roles, from just a minor committee chair through to other things. So, but everyone's different. Some people learn better by doing a week's course. You know, everyone's different.
Coleen?
Yeah, so I would take advantage of individual classes that I could sign up for at my institution, you know, like a 2-hour class on negotiating and a 2-hour class on Myers-Briggs or whatever, you know, these different piecemeal things, and they were helpful. I did eventually do ELAM, which is a very intensive year-long course that really, it ties a lot of things together, and it also is a phenomenal opportunity to network with other aspiring leaders, and I thought it was extremely helpful. A coach is very, very different, and I have used a coach in usually around specific issues or specific building a strategy for a certain thing, not in terms of like you know, meeting with them every week for years to like coach you all the time, but really to say, okay, I want to get to this place, and here's where I think the barriers are, and they can help you think through your strategy. In some ways similar to the way a mentor would, but there's subtle differences between coaching and mentoring. But I do think it's very useful to take advantage of opportunities to learn different sort of areas of leadership. And then the other thing I was going to say is that books are helpful too. There are lots of books. There's a great one called Surrounded by Idiots. And the point of the book is you're actually not really surrounded by idiots, but that's how it can come across if you don't actually see the world the same way the other people see the world. But there's a ton of books that can help you build various aspects of your leadership, especially if you identify areas where it's not your strength. So like if I don't know, I can't think of a specific example, but if negotiating isn't your strength, well then identify, there's some very good books about negotiating and the ways to think about it. So anyhow, I would encourage people to reach out and read.
Just to make a quick plug for what we do have at the School of Medicine, so you're all aware of, Department of Medicine does have their own, what's called their Light Leadership Training Program. At the School of Medicine level, we have the SAIL Academy, which is open to all faculty, men and women. It's Sustainable Advancement Initiatives and Leadership. We're to start our 4th cohort. You do have to be nominated from your chair or division chief. It is a 6-month course that we run, and usually we are opening applications in February and make the selections in April. And then, as Brian mentioned, there's the Provost Leadership Academy at the UCI level as well. Brian, do you want to ask the next question?
Well, I was just going to, sure, but I wanted to just also add, you know, as I was listening to Jeff, I was thinking, yeah, my answer was going to be, well, I took Culturally Aware Mentorship, which is a national program. It's multiple sessions. It's done by Zoom, and there's occasionally an offering at UCI if folks are interested. And I thought, well, that's my formal training. But then I realized when Jeff was speaking, well, I was chair of an NIH study panel, and I was chair of a chair search committee, and I was co-chair, or then I was acting chair of IACUC at one point. And so I realized, you kind of forget because you've been here a while. Like I've done all these kinds of small things, but added together, you get a feel for the culture. And then the other thing I would add is that you could make it known. I was asked a long time ago to be on a scientific misconduct review committee. So, and there was another one where there was a authorship dispute, and they needed a third party, a disinterested third party to volunteer for that. So there's these kind of little things that are, in fact, really interesting that you can do in small doses and start to get a feel for, do you want to be part of the leadership team or not? And then the other point I would make, which was came across at the Provost Leadership Academy, we're training people to be leaders, but we're also training people to see they don't want to be a leader. So there's nothing wrong with stepping up or volunteering and being on a committee, and then using that experience to realize that, actually, I'm not as interested as I thought I was in this. Because again, as Jeff mentioned, we're all working 42-hour weeks. I don't think Jeff mentioned an exact hour number, but and then if you're leadership, it's not 42 hours, it's 43 hours. So you better decide that I actually want to commit to this and put in the extra hours, because you're going to be missing dinners, you're going to be spending weekends doing extra things or reading, and it ought to be something that you're passionate in. So that's some advice I would give. So I guess the question I wanted to ask folks is, have there been, mistakes that either you made or mistakes that you see other faculty make when they're trying to pursue a leadership position? What are the common mistakes, and what can they do to avoid them? And Megan, I saw you smile, so maybe you've got one.
Oh yeah, I've made plenty of mistakes. I think one is just not being reactionary, and obviously thinking about things before you send them. So I see people get a little heated about stuff that doesn't really need a ton of your time or effort, and that sometimes will just resolve on its own. So I would encourage you to just give things a little bit of time, and to give your chair the benefit of the doubt, give your leaders the benefit of the doubt. I think that if you're always feeling like UCI is against you, and we have to, like this mentality of like it's terrible here and things like that. I think, having an attitude of optimism, I think has been proven in leadership to get you places. And so like having a positive affect, certainly things always need to change and things always need to improve, but having a growth mindset with that. And oops, sorry, I just lost my earbud. So that's one thing I would say. And there's some emergency medicine faculty in this room who are really good at balancing that of creating, of just making positive change rather than just sitting complaining about things. So I'd say that's one thing. I'd say I would say putting an away message on your email is a mistake that I often make. And like I'll just say, oh, like I know I'm gonna be out of the office Monday, but I'm gonna get to this. And then I miss something like important because I really wasn't in the office that day. And then, by the time you catch up, because you did go on vacation or something like that, it's like 2 days later. And so now you look really late to the response. And so just having the people that they need to contact in your absence, I would say. I still haven't figured out my email hygiene. I think Jeff, Brian, we had a good conversation about that at one point, of just like how to manage the sheer volume of emails that go through your inbox a day. So making sure that you can manage those simple things. That was a little bit of a run-on answer.
Did you take my advice? You just grab the top 100 and delete them?
Yeah. I'm
if you
currently
do that
doing
every
that.
day, folks, you'll be far more productive.
I'm at 286 right now, trying to get down. I was at 400 earlier today, so I think I'm doing okay.
Colleen, I don't want to repeat how many unread messages are in my inboxes. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Colleen, what do you have to add?
I would say the biggest mistake I made is not reaching out for help. Thinking that I have to solve everything myself, and not especially early in my career, thinking that, that would be a sign of me showing that I'm capable and I'm independent, and when in reality, I should have reached out to others to, talk through the challenges and to have other people help me come up with solutions. I think you can get a false sense of, if I'm a leader, I'm supposed to be able to do it all. And I think I would say, don't make that mistake. Reach out to others for help.
I think that's a great piece of advice. If sometimes somebody's already solved the problem that you're dealing with, and if you just ask around, you don't have to reinvent the wheel again, and people will realize you're being clever by asking, has someone solved this, rather than trying to solve it all yourself. So that was great. Jeff Abbott, you don't have to admit to your own personal mistake. What have you witnessed? What's the most common mistakes you see faculty doing at UCI?
Oh, I would say, look, this comes around to, I'm going to turn it around a bit and say, what are the best pieces of advice I got to prevent me from making my biggest mistakes? So one of the best pieces of advice I got was from Diane O'Dowd, who told me, don't take things personally. And it was such an earth-shattering, I don't know why I needed someone to tell me that, because whenever I've lost sleep over this job, it's when I've taken things personally. I don't lose sleep over crisis. I lose sleep over it when I take it personally. It doesn't mean you don't care, far from it, but it means if you can compartmentalize things happening at work, and stop turning it over and over in your mind, and you sleep well, that's a game. It was a game changer for me, actually. And I used to lose sleep when I was the Senate chair, and I used to lose sleep in my leadership roles now. And then I gradually learned how to not take things personally, and now I sleep like a baby. And I think I'm more effective. And again, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means that you're able to handle things much better. So that was and another leader told me, look, when you're in leadership, if nothing blows up, it's a good day. So things are going to happen, right? We have some of us have multiple leadership roles, complex jobs in a large organization with 5,000 people in it, right? And so something's going to happen every day, and you need to be able to handle it and not take it personally. So, and not think everything's a crisis. And I think so. Once I avoided those mistakes, I think I got more effective, and I certainly sleep better at night.
And I 100% second and third that. I think that is just such an important piece that I had to get through as well. And I think it's just your ego. And I agree. The times when I've had that icky feeling in my stomach of ugh, I really don't like this situation as a leader, it's all because it's my ego. And it's what's my reputation as a leader? Is that being compromised right now? It's never someone is dying or something like that. In the emergency department, obviously I've made mistakes in the emergency department that have fortunately been caught. And sometimes I've been oh my gosh, I'm so bummed out about this, but the patient's fine in the end. And thankfully someone caught it. And what I'm feeling bad about is that my ego, that people know I'm not a perfect doctor, right? So, I mean, that's just an analogy to leadership, right? So sometimes if the students write anonymous feedback about how terrible everything is and how XYZ, and I just take it so personally. I'm but this what we're doing all these things for them, and don't they see that it's so great, and so I just need to get over that and say, all right, no one's dying right now. It's a good day. And using that feedback instead for the betterment of the role. So how can I be a better leader as a result of this feedback? How can I respond to this set of students better? How can I be better at my job? How can I be more responsive? How can I be more effective? And just trying to set your ego aside every day and acknowledging when it is your ego that's causing you strife.
Self-awareness.
Coleen, do you have any thoughts? Any other further thoughts? As a chair that you've seen your division chiefs make mistakes or anything, kind of more practical or more experiential things that you've seen.
I'm having a technical difficulty here. Can you move on to somebody else? I'm having
Sure,
a phone issue.
absolutely. So just to kind of wrap up, we have a couple minutes left. So I wanted to ask all the panelists, you guys have given great advice on, things that mid-career faculty can start to work on developing or honing in on more, including emotional intelligence, time management, making it known that you're interested in leadership roles. Any last piece of advice that you would like to give mid-career faculty or wish that you had as mid-career to get into leadership? Jeff?
I just, my advice in terms of you should know what to expect. And I don't want to put anybody off. You have to be prepared for your life to change radically, but it's incredible how great that can feel when you start to get the hang of it. I spend almost all my day on Outlook, and I learned how to write scientific papers while keeping up with emails as they come in and checking my calendar every 20 minutes. I've been able to learn how to do that stuff so I can be as responsive as I can, because one of the things I pride myself in, going back to Megan and the ego thing, I pride myself in being responsive, because I see my role as a conduit very often to get the right people connected to the right people, so we can move things along and get things done in the school, right? So I think you have to when you're approaching this, you have to realize you're going to have to change the way you think about things, the way you operate, your structure of your day and your week. But it's exciting, right? It's a challenge, and so anybody on this call can do that, but you have to make the decision that that's what you want to do. And in terms of, again, I really encourage people, if you're interested in a future leadership role, be on a ton of committees appropriate to your seniority, not at the expense of all the other stuff you have to do. Because when we're looking for people, well, the people that first come to mind are the people that we see on all the committees, right? So don't do too many as an assistant or even an associate professor, but you will need to be visible for you to get thought of in those ways, right? And again, as we mentioned, I encourage people, reach out. I'm very happy to hear from someone who says, what would it take to do your job or this job or that job? And what should I be doing? We're very happy to hear that, because we do want to think about succession planning. And we had an idea at one time where we said, we're going to have people apply to a role, a specific role, but then we can use that list to look when we have other roles coming up, right? And it worked really well. Remember that, Brian? We reached out to the same list of people that weren't successful in that more senior leadership job. Only one person could get it. But then we approached them about other leadership roles that are steps along the way. And that group, that was phenomenal. So I would encourage you to apply for things and reach out to us, because we are listening and we do want to think about succession.
I have in the chat, but it is anonymous, that which I love, is be a good person. Don't undercut other people. Be a good colleague. Most of us are here to improve the world, to improve our patient care, our research, and to touch lives. So dip your toe in. Don't be afraid to try and experiment. You don't need to be on a lot of committees, as Jeff said. Be on a committee, and then if you like that, aim to be the co-chair or the chair of that committee, and you'll be noticed. Coleen, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I fixed the speaker thing, but the thing that I would add is, remember, you can only do what you can do. And sometimes when you're trying to do leadership roles and you're trying to, take on all these different assignments, it can feel overwhelming because you've got so many things on your plate, and you need to be able to step back and say, I can only do what I can do, and I'm not going to lose my mind or stress over the fact that I can't get 100% of the things done today. So I'm just going to prioritize, do what I can do, and then take some time for yourself. Make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're not burning the candle at both ends, trying to get seen and recognized. And you'll never be 100% caught up, and that's okay. and I do think sometimes people shun away from leadership because they feel like that means there'll be too much on their plate, and it doesn't have to be.
All right, thank you. And Megan, I have 748 in my HS inbox.
Oh my gosh. I feel a little bit, my ego feels relieved right now.
I
So
wanted to, just before we wrap up, I just wanted to make a couple more plugs about some events that were coming up. So today, a lot of our panelists mentioned going on committees. In October, the HS Mentoring Committee is hosting an event to talk about different committee opportunities, both at the School of Medicine as well as UCI Health. So please do look out in your emails for that event. It will be on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. So since we did mention a lot about committee work today, so I just wanted to make that plug before we end.
all right. Well, I think we should wind up and give people their evening back. Thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you everyone who joined and is learning more about leadership opportunities at UCI. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Brian. You too.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.